Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the live stream on the Jimmy Dore Show. We have a special guest that just stopped in with us. Hang on, I want to read his introduction. Hang on. I have it. I printed it out on special. Greg Palast is here. He's covered Venezuela for the BBC television and The Guardian, and you can get the film of his investigative reports, The Assassination of Hugo Chavez, as a free download at gregpalast.com. It's Greg Palast. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Jimmy.
Thanks for being here again. I appreciate it.
I love it here.
Now, you've done a lot of great work, and recently you've done some great work on the cross-check.
Yes,
and
on
so
vote theft by the GOP, how Trump stole the election. You know, my film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, was all about how Trump shoplifted the election, how they're going to shoplift 2020. So, but they're not satisfied with stealing the American elections. They have to steal the Venezuelan elections, too, while they're at it.
They have to steal the Venezuelan elections. Now, so you have some very interesting... We've covered Venezuela extensively here at the show. So, like, for instance, well, they're not showing this kind of stuff, right? So this Abby Martin, how many Western news outlets showed the massive marches in Venezuela protesting the U.S.-backed coup today? I'm going to guess 0. So we also showed you... We also showed you a video from inside a Venezuelan supermarket that was Max Blumenthal exposing the lies that you can't get food in Venezuela. It's actually plentiful. Debunking CNN lies about Venezuela. So that was the Panama ambassador who was saying that Maduro was a mafia guy instead of exactly the opposite. It's Trump and Bolton and Abrams who are the mafia guys.
Oh no!
Yeah,
our own president.
And we showed you even Bernie Sanders got caught repeating CIA talking points. You have to remember when, as George Galloway pointed out to me, that whenever the regime change war criminals want to launch an invasion, they first have to launch a narrative. They first have to get you to agree to the pretext of why they have to go in. And the pretext is always blank is a bad guy. He oppresses his own people. He gasses his own people. That's what they said about Saddam Hussein. That's what they said about Muammar Gaddafi. That's what they said about Assad. And that's what they're saying about Maduro. And so when you repeat, I think Maduro's a bad guy, but I don't think we should go in, what you're doing is you're actually affirming the CIA's bullshit pretext for a coup and an invasion and a regime change war. You're actually doing more damage than you're doing good. And that's what this was about, Bernie Sanders. And it's not just him, it's every politician except for maybe Ilhan Omar. And it's every news journalist except for Max Blumenthal, Aramate, and here. So Jorge Ramos, we showed you him pushing for Venezuelan regime change, like the scummiest of any journalist I've ever seen in my life. He's the worst. Yes. And now Greg Palast is here. Now, Greg Palast is here to debunk all those guys, because he's actually been to Venezuela. He's actually covered it. And he sent me this video today, and this is super interesting. Do you want to tell people what they're going to see?
Yeah, this is from the film The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, and it begins with the XL Keystone Pipeline. And what does that have to do with Venezuela?
What does that have to do with Venezuela?
And what does that have to do with the Koch brothers? And now you're going to find out Koch brothers overthrowing the government of Venezuela and the XL pipeline and how they're connected. And then just that Agent Orange guy there while he was running for president.
Okay, here we go.
I want the Keystone Pipeline.
You should love the Keystone Pipeline.
Love the Keystone Pipeline. The Keystone XL pipeline will bring the world's filthiest oil, tar sands from Canada,
All the way across the belly of the United States, over our water resources, down to Texas.
oil to Texas? Why in the world would you have to ship oil to Texas?
Why?
The answer is here in Corpus Christi, home of the Koch brothers' giant refinery.
But the Kochs have a problem. They can't use Texas oil. It's not filthy enough. It's not dirty enough for their refinery. They have to use super heavy crude, gunk, like you get from the tar sands.
So for years, the Kochs had to import their extra filthy crude from Caracas. And the price of that heavy oil was set by this man, the Frank Sinatra of Venezuela.
Years ago, President Hugo Chavez told me,
Tú sabes que Venezuela tiene la reserva de petróleo.
Venezuela, with the world's biggest reserve of oil, would really stick it to U.S. customers like the Kochs.
Do them.
Okay.
Okay. First of all, eye-popping stuff, right? Didn't know that he had to import stuff from Venezuela. Didn't know he had to import the dirty crude from Venezuela. Did not know that this had to do with the Koch brothers. Did not know that. So that's great work.
Right. So what happens is people don't know this. The Kochs have these giant refineries, some of the biggest in the United States and the world, on the Gulf Coast of Texas. They're in the middle of oil fields. They can't use Texas oil because it's literally not heavy and filthy enough. And so they have to take almost all their oil from Venezuela, the only place where you can get this super heavy oil. Normally, it's discounted. But because they know the Kochs have to use their oil, Chavez, was really bright man, was squeezing the Kochs by, the cojones there and charging them a premium for his oil. And the Kochs have been going crazy. They were losing money at their refinery because of the price. So you have two choices. You got to get the XL pipeline, and it's taken too long to get there. So first they had to get Trump to come in as president and announce and overcome all of the EPA's objection, everyone's objection, and get the XL pipeline approved. It still ain't there. So what do? You better overthrow the government of Venezuela with some guy named Juan Guaido, who has said, and I quote, "I will open up the Venezuela oil fields to American companies," and in particular, and so you have to understand, Exxon was basically thrown out of Venezuela. They've had lawsuits going against Venezuela. Guaido says he will pay off Exxon, and he will let Exxon take control again of the Venezuelan oil fields. That's what this game is about. It's about the oil. And who is this guy Juan Guaido, by the way, that Trump has said is recognized as president, that declared himself president? Just so you know, he's not someone who said, "Oh, the election was stolen from me." He literally never ran for president.
I know.
He's this 35-year-old white guy, and that's really at the heart. That's the other thing that Trump likes. He speaks good English. He hung out with the right-wing think tanks in Washington, went to George Washington University. He's a rich guy. He's a white guy. That's really, really important. And in a black nation, in a mestizo, a nation which is made up of about 70% mestizos. That is, people who are, as Chavez told me, a combination of negro e indio, as he said, black and indigenous. That's the majority of the people in Venezuela, but they're finding a white guy to run it.
Yeah, all right, so we're going to get to that in just a second. Before we get to that, because that's a very interesting twist that no one else is reporting except you.
Yes.
And now we will also be reporting that. And so that's, again, very easy for us to be better than the every other journalist in the country and outside the country. So we know this. We've told you this before, but to recap, it's more oil in reserve in Venezuela than in Saudi Arabia. In fact, twice as much oil in Venezuela as there is in Saudi Arabia. Yes, there is a threat of starvation, but because of the U.S. Euro right and Canadian embargo. So we've told you that sanctions that we've been, the United States and the West have been imposing on Venezuela, that sanctions aren't there to bring democracy to the people. Sanctions are there to bring a country to its knees so we can overthrow their government, install a puppet, and steal their natural resources and give it to the United States corporations. Okay. So also the right-wing British government is refusing to give Venezuela $1.5 billion of its gold held in the UK.
By the way, I want to mention this.
Yeah.
This is very, very important about the UK.
Sure.
Here's when the right-wing Tory government seized Venezuela's gold. The gold is held in trust for Venezuela, just physically held in the exchequer in the basement of the Treasury in Britain. And they won't give Venezuela its $1.5 billion of gold. Why? Because the Venezuelan government refused to give British Petroleum the fields that had been run by the French company Total. France left Venezuela. The British government asked Venezuela to give those oil fields to British Petroleum, to BP. Venezuela said, "Screw you," last year. Immediately after, they said, "Well, guess what? You don't give us your oil, we have your gold."
Wow.
How about that? That's what it's about. And it's not about, the British say, they want democracy. They didn't care about democracy.
Of course they don't care.
BP was going to get the oil.
Right.
But now suddenly they care about democracy. And I do want to emphasize, by the way, that President Maduro, who I've met, who came to visit me in my office in New York, and I've met the opposition leaders too, except for this guy Guaido that no one had ever heard of. And I got to tell you, he was elected president. You may not like him. I mean, a lot of people don't like Trump.
A lot of people don't. More people voted against Trump than voted for him, and he's our president. And that didn't happen in Venezuela.
And Maduro, they had a very close election, actually. It was hard fought. Maduro won by a small amount. It was hard fought. They have a very split government, and you have a national assembly which is split, but it's about still there's a majority of the government supporting party. Jimmy Carter, who reviews elections worldwide, has previously said that Venezuela has the most honest election system he's seen anywhere in the world, and way more than in Georgia, where he's from.
Yeah.
I've reported about that theft in the midterms. They didn't have anything like that. Unlike, in Georgia, I discovered that they illegally removed a third of a million voters of color. They didn't do that in Venezuela, but now they want to replace the president of color of Venezuela with the white guy chosen by Donald Trump.
So just a few more facts. The U.S. Treasury Secretary has seized Venezuela's U.S. assets, which is Citgo. So, the Citgo gas stations, those are owned by Venezuela. And so the United States just says, well, we're not going to recognize Maduro, the elected president, as president, and we're going to give all the control of all the money from Citgo to Guaido. That's what they did, right?
Yeah.
Also, the Kochs don't have to pay for their Venezuelan oil. They don't have to pay for their Venezuelan oil?
What happens is they owe the money to Venezuela, but they are blocked against their will, I'm sure.
To pay them.
They're not allowed to pay.
One of the sanctions, that's right. So one of the sanctions is that you're not allowed to pay money to Venezuela for the oil, even if they're delivering it to you. You still you're not allowed. That's illegal. So you see how sanctions are meant to bring a country to its knees, not bring democracy. Also, Venezuela's money is going to Citgo's creditor, Goldman Sachs. Remember Donald Trump said he was going to drain the swamp and he was going to fight back on Goldman Sachs? Donald Trump is Goldman Sachs. So again, now if you're a Trump supporter, you have to admit that he conned you, that Trump is a billionaire con man. He never really gave a shit about you because Goldman Sachs is getting all the Venezuelan money. He's put Goldman Sachs in his he's just like the rest of them. He's working with Elliot Abrams and John Bolton. There's no denying that. He is the swamp. So Trump is the swamp. Just like I got duped by Barack Obama, you got duped by Donald Trump. Okay? He's just as scum of the earth as anybody is. All right? So and now here's the twist on Venezuela that we have previously. So we've reported most of what Greg has said, but here's the twist that Greg has. He's teased it a little bit. In Venezuela, white supremacy is a key to Trump's coup. Now, you wrote this on February 8th. So here, you said you can explain this. He can explain this in 3 pictures. So let's do it. Here's the first picture. Who's that?
That's Juan Guaido, nicely shiny white, a little tan, nice tan though, and his pale wife and his
they're super pale.
Super pale. I mean, they're not John Bolton albino,
right?
But in Venezuela, people with this color skin, they don't even call themselves Venezuelans. By the way, they call themselves Spaniards. Okay?
Oh, no
and they are an
kidding.
elite minority that's run the country for 400 years. Hugo Chavez was the first guy that, as he said, he was negro e indio. He was the Nelson Mandela of Venezuela. And when he passed away from stomach cancer, he said, elect Maduro. Maduro ran twice and won. Who was his vice president. And Maduro is also, like Chavez, a dark-skinned guy. He was a bus driver. He was one of the working people of Venezuela that was getting screwed out of the oil money. This is a fabulously rich nation. But there is Guaido, the great white knight chosen by Trump, never ran for president. His only qualification seems to be that he's shiny white.
Here's another picture. Tell people what this picture is.
Okay, if you think that this is the meeting of the Republican Party at Mar-a-Lago, no, that is the Venezuelan opposition. Those are the deputies, the members of the Venezuelan Assembly, who are pro-Guaido. And as you see, they are lily white. It's very important. Keep that picture in your mind.
There are a lot of pink faces in that crowd.
There's more pink than at a 13-year-old girl's birthday party.
So this is the people who are supporting Trump's coup invasion and an intervention in Venezuela, and this is Juan Guaido's group.
This is his party. So he was head of the assembly with those characters. Right?
Okay, so now here's the picture of the people they want to overthrow, which is the Chavistas, which is the party of the people, which is the one that Maduro is the head of. And here's a picture of them. You see the difference? Look at the difference. So you see white. Wait a minute. There's black. There you go. White,
right.
dark.
This is not done by Jimmy Dore's tricky filter business.
No.
Now this looks like a meeting of the NAACP in Birmingham. I've been to a meeting of the NAACP in Birmingham.
Wow, it really does.
And
actually. Look at that.
so now what that looks like is the Venezuelan people. First of all, the opposition was about 60 members of parliament of their Congress and their National Assembly. This is their Chamber of Deputies. This is about 120 members. And that's about the division in the nation. It's about 1/3 white and 2/3 mestizo, black, indigenous, voters of color, and poor people. Okay, this is the government supporting group. So this is one thing that the rest of the media has not even touched. It's about a white racist suprematist takeover. It's as if it's like MAGA, except make Venezuela white again. And it's very, very important to understand this. This is one of the reasons why people don't want Guaido. They don't want a return to what it was effectively apartheid, where not only the white people controlled, it's not that the darker skinned people are racist. They're saying those people stole our country. They stole the oil money and took it to Venezuela. Took it from Venezuela to Miami, squirreled it away. It was all stolen. It was massively corrupt. It's funny that they talk about Maduro's corruption. He's a bus driver. He lives like, he lives very, very simply.
Oh no, he's eating steak while everybody else is.
Yeah, he went to a restaurant.
Remember that? He went to a restaurant.
Yeah. So what happened is, I got to tell you, when I was there, okay. By the way, started reporting on Venezuela in 1976, even though that's amazing because I'm only 40. But
right.
It started in 1976 when Caracas was surrounded by 1 million cardboard houses. 1 million cardboard houses in a nation soaked in oil, cardboard with tin roofs. Chavez came in, they're gone. They were replaced by apartment buildings. Starvation was put to an end. Now, let me quote the CIA. You know that organization, Central Intelligence? They have something called a fact book. And the funny thing about their internal fact book is that they have to tell the truth to themselves within the intelligence community. Their internal fact book says that Chavez came in and reduced poverty, the poverty rate from 50% of the population, half the people were in poverty, to 27%. Basically cut poverty in half, reduced infant mortality, reduced child mortality, increased education, in fact, made it universal, and extended
the literacy rate really rose.
The literacy rate massively rose, and in addition, you had basically Medicare for all before America got it. Total, complete medical coverage. I went into what were once the poor areas, now are apartment buildings, and I ran into people who were very anti-Chavez. These are very political people, and he was very anti-Chavez. He says, but I have to say, Chavez came in. We have a doctor in the basement of the building. All the kids here go to school. No one's hungry. I will admit that. I would rather have someone else there than Maduro or Chavez. But, we have to grant that for the first time, the people got the oil money. How dare they? The oil money was supposed to go to U.S. corporations, to Goldman Sachs, and the rest. And that's, a big part of the issue. And I want to add one other thing there when we get to the oil. It's not only so these people, the darker-skinned people, when you look at those demonstrations as well, you showed demonstration at the beginning, which is very rare because that was from Abby Martin's site. When I was down in Venezuela for BBC television, the U.S. press was doing the same damn thing in 2002 when they seized Chavez and kidnapped him. They said, look at all these anti-Chavez marchers. And it's true. I would go to these marches with like 100,000 anti-Chavez marchers. And it was funny. They were like, the women were in high heels. I mean, the men in business suits. But there were a lot. There were like 100,000. They were white and they were rich and they wanted you to know it. And they're going through the center of Caracas, marching through the shopping center areas. And those are the images that we saw on U.S. TV. And that's the same stuff we're getting now. The massive marches. By the way, if it's a dictatorship, whoever allowed massive marches by the opposition?
So that was what I want. That's what I keep telling people. They keep saying, well, you have to admit he is a dictator. And I say, first of all, why do you give a fuck if he's a dictator? Who cares? The United States supports 70% of the world's dictators. That's not why we overthrow someone or don't.
and
Again, you're repeating the CIA pretext for an invasion. Say again.
Oh, by the way, yeah, unless I'm wrong, aren't the Saudi royals just dictators in bathrobes?
Yeah.
You know, we call them royals. They're just dictators in
They're just
bathrobes.
dictators.
And I was in other oil countries, other oil nations like Azerbaijan, where there's
Azerbaijan.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
You can mispronounce it any way you want to. But,
Is it pronounced Azerbaijan?
well, it depends if you're Azeri.
Oh, that's how they say it?
When I was there, you know, maybe
I've always-
they're all putting me on.
Oh,
But anyway,
no.
but they
all right.
so
all right. You don't have to
it
fucking
is
do
absolutely
that.
a dictator.
Greg,
the
stop it.
Aliyev dictatorship. The
What is
Aliyev.
it? Azerbaijan?
Okay, you
That's
got
how
it.
you pronounce it?
She did pretty
So
good.
right in your ear, Greg.
Yeah, okay, I'm wrong.
Right in your fucking ear. Okay.
Well, what I know, I didn't speak Azeri, you know.
okay.
So, but it's their joke for everyone who shows
Okay,
up.
okay.
And then places like Kazakhstan. These are serious.
Now, is
Did I
that how you
pronounce that
say
correctly?
Kazakhstan?
Check it. Check it.
Okay, Kazakhstan, Brazil. I mean, but Kazakhstan is a serious dictatorship, and we love those people, right? The Clintons.
Oh, you mean the ruling class we love?
Of Kazakhstan,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, the rulers
what you
who
mean.
are murderous dictators.
Yes.
You've got, and these are the people we're supporting. And God forbid you mount a demonstration against the Aliyev family in Azerbaijan or in Kazakhstan against Nazarbayev. These are dictators who you've never heard of because they don't want you to know.
That's exactly
They
right.
don't want you to know about these dictators. We don't overthrow them. We do it. We arm them. We support them, and we help them crush their dissidents. But in Venezuela, you will see those opposition demonstrations. They allow 100,000 people into the street to scream and holler and say, overthrow the government. They even allow people there, which they don't allow here, to say, shoot the president, kill the president.
Yes.
They call him the monkey.
And they call them, which goes
right.
into the racist meme.
Yeah, the racist memes, and they're always. When I was there, I literally marched with the opposition. I was literally marching along, talking to people. Half of them speak English, and
they thought you're one of them because you're white.
Yeah, so they thought, hey, so talking about killing the monkey and all that stuff, and then you get to but what was never shown on U.S. TV, and I finally had to break even the silence in Britain for BBC by showing the marches that were 5 times as large, 500,000 people in Caracas marching in favor of the government, and those groups, those are people in jeans and T-shirts, and they are dark-skinned, almost to a 1, and that is something that they don't show you. You saw Abby Martin's picture. I mean, it's as far as the eye can see. You can these demonstrations and counter demonstrations. It is a thriving, unfortunately, a bit violent democracy. Both sides, everyone in Venezuela has a gun, and there's a bit too much shooting. Not a bit too much. Any shooting is terrible.
Yeah.
But the idea that there's a dictatorship and Maduro's gunning down his own people, you have to understand the anti-Maduro people are shooting people. Okay.
Yes, that's what people don't understand is that most of the violence is coming from the opposition. It was the opposition that was intimidating people and attacking people who wanted to vote and attacking
imagine?
voting centers. It was the opposition who wanted to make the election illegitimate because they knew they couldn't win.
Right. So what happens? You have this white minority that if you have an election, it's just like South Africa.
Yeah.
If you have a real election,
they're
who's
gonna
going to
lose.
win?
That's
it's
right.
not going to be a white guy.
Ain't going to be the white guy.
Okay.
Ain't going to be fucking Juan Guaido.
And it's certainly not going to be a guy who says he's working with the oil companies, loves the oil companies.
That's right.
But, I saw this back in 2002, just before the coup. Actually, a woman came to me in London, Delcy Rodriguez, who said, President Chavez had sent me to talk to you. You got to save him from being killed in a coup on the Ides of March 15. And I said, who's Hugo Chavez? I didn't know. I figured he's another South American, whatever. Then I studied up and I found out this guy was feeding the people. He was building houses. He was amazing. And but March 15th, he wasn't kidnapped. So all the people at BBC made fun of me, or he wasn't overthrown. A week later, they kidnapped Chavez. Now, here's the thing.
So you were working for the BBC.
Yeah.
You're debunking the narrative and in real time.
And
I'm working.
And I go down there. Okay, I'm down there. And one of the things I did do, by the way, is I found out that the New York Times ran a story by a reporter named Juan Ferrero, who's still covering for them, and
Yes.
And he said Chavez had resigned. This is the headline: Chavez resigns, knowing he was unpopular and recognizing that he was incompetent, and so he simply, in shame, resigned from office. I got calls from this woman, Delcy Rodriguez, who's now, by the way, vice president of Venezuela. She's now the vice president. And she says, President Chavez has been kidnapped. You can talk to the military. Here's military people who can say we're trying to get him back. 1 million people went into the streets of Caracas and demanded he be returned, or they would kill everyone who had taken his position. That an oil company lawyer had named himself president, just like Juan Guaido, self-declared, and then just like here, where Trump endorses this self-declared president, the U.S. ambassador went to the presidential palace and took part in, they had an inaugural ball.
Right.
It was like a scene out of Genet. I mean, where they had the self-proclaimed president, the oil company lawyer, had working for Exxon, had a sash. They named him president, and they had a whole, literally
and
whole
the
ball.
there was a Bush representative there.
Bush's ambassador was there to congratulate the new president. And then about a couple hours later, they were told, unless you get out of there, the people are going to come in and kill you. So they left. In fact, the military said there's a secret passageway. We'll let you out. And they let him out. I even talked to the guy who took over, who claimed the Guaido of the time, self-proclaimed president, a guy named Pedro Carmona. And he was put under house arrest, and I was allowed to go speak with him. And, he just said, well, civil society, just the same stuff we get now, he really thinks he deserved to be president without running. Same as Guaido. Hey, same as Trump, and here's our biggest problem in this story, Jimmy.
Well, I would say,
Okay.
can I guess what the biggest problem is? To me, the biggest problem is the U.S. media.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to give you two, but especially
Okay.
the U.S. media. Okay. Let me go to the U.S. media. Okay, you didn't see this story of black and white Venezuela.
No,
that is white guys.
Which falls right into their Trump
Right.
narrative too, by the way. So the fact that they're not reporting this just goes to show you how in the pocket of the military-industrial complex and the oil companies that the U.S. press really is.
Yeah, and totally, and even they are actively suppressing the information that they know is there because
That they know it. If I know it and you know it, they fucking know it, Greg.
Well, you can see with your eyes when 500,000 brown people go marching down the street,
Right.
and you don't show that, and all you say is this guy is
A dictator.
unpopular.
Right.
Oh, wait a minute, and no one says this guy wasn't. You're not even getting. You're getting a weird twist narrative. For example, there's some woman named Kirsten Gillibrand, and I don't know. She's running. What's she running for? Okay, yeah. So Kirsten Gillibrand said we have to recognize Guaido as president because, and this is a quote, he was legitimately elected. He was legitimate. So Senator Gillibrand, one question, pop quiz. What day was this election held that never happened? So she's got him a legitimate, and she's running for president.
And she's running for
and people say, oh, Trump's stupid. Excuse me? We got, she gets the orange hair comb over ignoramus award. Unfortunately, she is joined by a whole bunch of Democrats.
Yes.
And
Nancy
this is one of the
Pelosi, Chuck Schumer.
horrific stories here where, for example, and that's why when you say Bernie Sanders started backing up and using a bit of the CIA line, because he had Claire Wasserman Schultz. You remember the woman who...
Debbie Wasserman Schultz?
excuse me, Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
It's pronounced Debbie.
Yeah, pronounced Debbie. No, I have a friend. Got prenility. What's going on here? Let me put on my other head. I know what the problem is. I'm wearing the hat that Chavez wore. And it's shaking me up.
Okay.
I am
Debbie
21.
Wasserman Schultz.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz said that, in fact, Trump wasn't rough enough on Venezuela, even though he's
Jesus.
withholding their money for food and medicine.
Right.
Right? He's not tough enough on Venezuela.
She's a sociopath.
And that Bernie Sanders should not be allowed in the Democratic Party unless he denounces Maduro as a dictator. He should not be permitted to run for president. This is her idea of democracy. But she already did that once. Remember, Wasserman Schultz is the one who feloniously, who committed the crime, and it is a crime to move National Democratic Party funds into the primary fight against Bernie Sanders. She was the one who organized that. So this woman already has an allergy to democracy. She doesn't like it in America. She doesn't like it in Venezuela.
She doesn't like it in her district.
And so why do
either.
you think Bernie...
Or
right.
district,
and
yeah.
either with Tim
Yeah.
Canova, why do you think that Bernie lets himself be pushed around like by someone like Debbie Wasserman Schultz?
I think he's scared that the media is going to just
How
really
stupid.
red bait him massively. And
He's so stupid.
and they're gonna.
It's just like Barack Obama. They're gonna call you a socialist anyways.
Yeah,
you stupid
I know.
asshole.
So it's
you stupid fucking asshole.
Right. So at least, he is saying that kind of halfway line as you say, oh, we shouldn't, these are terrible people, but we shouldn't invade.
Right.
Only Tulsi Gabbard, by the way, is running for president, says we are using starvation as a weapon to
Yes,
steal the oil
that's right.
of this nation. And that is illegal. By the way, the rapporteur for the United Nations.
Oh my God! This is yeah. So you know about this. I forgot to get that video of this guy. So tell people. So the
I'll tell you.
rapporteur from the UN.
Now, I understand what a rapporteur is. That's the investigator sent by the United Nations to report on what the situation is, independently of any crap.
And what did he find?
He reported that the elected government of Maduro was that this was an attempt to overthrow an elected government and use starvation. Exactly what Tulsi Gabbard said. Use starvation to obtain the nation's oil. What he said specifically is this is a crime against humanity.
Yes.
He called it a medieval siege.
Yes. So what people, when you say siege, so I've explained this before, I'll do it again. What siege warfare is it's a war crime. So in medieval times, they would surround a city and just cut off anything coming in and out, and people would starve to death. And so they do that today, and they cut off medicine and stuff. That's called siege warfare. That's a war crime. In fact, at The Hague, they just prosecuted somebody for doing that this last year, and so that's what they're doing.
And I want to add electronically, and what this is very important in the new world. Yes, you can stop shipments of food. By the way, here's the irony, right? The U.S. press concentrated on the fact that they were bringing in some boxes of food, like a bunch of candy bars to throw over the border from Brazil. And how dare they refuse humanitarian aid? What Maduro says is, we don't need charity. We need our money.
Yeah.
You're withholding, Britain's withholding the gold. The U.S. is withholding the money from the oil sold to the Koch brothers. They are being strangled. No, you cannot. Try to ship food to Venezuela. They can buy it. They have the money.
Yeah.
Let them use their own money to bring in their food, which is what they normally have done. And that's how they fed the population and lengthened people's lives. They won't let them do that.
Right.
And so it's a con. You take away food for 1 million people.
Right.
1 million people, and then you throw some boxes over the border and you say, oh, look, they don't want the boxes.
So
They
why don't you
want
just get rid of if you really want to give them aid, why don't you just get rid of the goddamn sanctions? That would be a logical question. Also, if you really wanted them to have the aid, give the aid to the Red Cross and they'll bring it in. They don't want to do that because it's not aid. What it is exactly what Elliot Abrams did before in Central America, which he strips in arms, he creates a civil war and death squads. That's what the United States is about.
By the way, you have this guy Guaido, the Trump-appointed, self-appointed president of Venezuela, who has said he's actually invited the U.S. to invade his country. Now, as you know, in the U.S., that's called treason, and under the Constitution, the punishment is death.
Right.
Okay, this guy's literally said if Maduro doesn't step down, we are inviting whatever aid is needed militarily to overthrow the government. He's literally called for the violent overthrow of his own elected government. Imagine inviting people to invade the United States. We're not exactly in love with Trump, but if someone said we're inviting France and Germany to invade the United States.
Imagine if Ted Cruz said that. We're inviting them because we want to overthrow Trump. Let's do it. Or Louis Gohmert or Nancy Pelosi.
Right.
Come on, somebody invade us because Trump's
the one thing is, with this idea that people are on, Nancy Pelosi is one of the least popular people in the entire nation. Can Trump appoint a new Speaker of the House? Can he,
right.
Why not make Mike Pence Speaker of the House?
Right.
Because Nancy Pelosi certainly has a lower popularity rating than Maduro of Venezuela.
Nancy Pelosi's popularity rating is half of what Trump's is.
And let's remember, so I ring up Pelosi because she's also going along with this overthrow the Venezuelan government stuff. This is suddenly, you got to explain something to me. Even I, with all my experience, can't get this one, which is, everything that Trump does is stupid and moronic. He screws up he screws up South the Korean summit, puts the world in danger.
Syria, everywhere he's doing the wrong thing.
And the Democratic Party's pissing on him and shitting on him. Look what a dummy he is. But in Venezuela, suddenly he's a genius. Oh my God, we didn't think of naming a white guy as president for Venezuela.
That's the story. That's the
How
amazing
can Pelosi
thing.
suddenly saying that Trump is a genius? And not only that, but this was a scheme crafted by John Bolton. This is not investigative reporting. As Bolton said, this was our plan. And this is our plan. And suddenly Pelosi thinks that this right-wing albino fruitcake neocon a liar, the guy that lied, one of the people that lied us into Iraq,
Right.
he's suddenly telling the truth about Venezuela.
I know.
You know, it's absolutely
What's shocking is to see
shocking.
my friends on the left report verbatim what John Bolton says about Venezuela. Then they call themselves on the left. If you're doing that, you're not a journalist, you're not on the left, you're a fucking idiot.
Well, and I talk about fucking idiots. I was just at the New York Times.
Yeah, let's talk
they
about
invited
those.
me in. I mean, I shouldn't
By
say
the way,
that. Now they
thank-
probably won't ever do that again.
Thank
But-
God the New York Times sucks as bad as it does, because the last time I did a video about the New York Times, it got 1.4 million hits.
Well, I got to tell you that I did, because I don't like to talk behind people's backs. So I met with the New York Times people, and I've told one of their so-called investigative reporters, I said the difference between the way I've been reporting for BBC and Guardian on issues like, for example, vote suppression, is that we do long-term, deep investigation of the facts, whereas the New York Times has a problem called lazy fuckism. and I explained this, and he says, well, not all Times reporters are lazy fucks. And I said, well, I'll have to investigate that too. But it's not apparent on its surface. And in fact, it's a side story, but it kind of explains what's going on in Venezuela. I was down in Georgia, right?
Right.
And I uncovered, then for Salon, I uncovered a mass. I sued the Secretary of State who was running for governor, running his own election, Brian Kemp, and I sued him for the names of all the people who were purged from the voter rolls. I then hired 4 firms from Silicon Valley. It wasn't cheap. It wasn't easy. This is not lazy fuckism investigative. This is investigative, okay? And I hired 4 firms to go through name by name and go through records and determine that 340,134 Georgians were illegally removed from the voter rolls. That's what elected this schmuck Brian Kemp, okay? After Kemp was elected through this steal, the New York Times calls me up and says, can you send us all your files? And I said, well, unlike your stories, all my files isn't the 5-page Word document that I can send you. It's 5 file cabinets of stuff that's been built up. I was investigating Georgia for 5 years, my friends. And it's like, I can't hit a button, the send button, and give you all my files, because they can't even imagine. And that's the problem, is they don't go down. I went down to Venezuela again and again. I got the information, and I got out of the Intercontinental Hotel in Caracas. I stopped talking to white people who speak English, and I went out into the countryside. And I got to tell you, to give you an example of how people feel about the Chavista government. Now it's Maduro who's taken over for Chavez,
Right?
And who was elected. I went out into the countryside with the leader of the opposition, one of the major leaders, Julio Borges, a great guy, actually, and went out in his Lexus, and he's got his Armani suit. You know, it's like he's so out of touch with what Venezuelans, and it was a very nice ride. And we're supposed to go to a rally in a distant town away from Caracas. And what do we get? We get, we show up, and the rally is one woman. So we went to her house and had some arepas. It was very nice. One person. The next day, Chavez had a rally in that town, and I went to go see what the reaction. I said, well, let's see who shows up in this little town. 2,000 screaming people. Chavez, Chavez. Because, for a simple reason, as one white reporter from the opposition newspapers, by the way, in a dictatorship, it's very odd. The entire media, almost the entire media, is completely against the government. In this dictatorship,
We're
right?
dictatorship,
Yeah,
right?
the dictatorship, right? And so one of these reporters for one of the biggest stations said to me, he gives these people bricks and mortar and bread, you know, and so they vote for him. It's like, oh, how dare he building houses and, you know, giving them food, you know, it's like, how dare he do that? And that's the terrible dictatorship that is harming its people. Now, I'm just so you know, I know Maduro personally, but I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think he's the most highly qualified person to be president. I think that there's some good qualified people there. I think Maduro's made some terrible mistakes. But that's not the fact. It's not for me to vote.
Correct.
Pick your president.
Barack Obama, George Bush, they all make terrible mistakes. Do we want somebody to fucking come in and invade us and appoint Louis Gohmert our president?
Yeah, I mean, if they said, you know, look, oh my God, you got a black president, we're going to have to find a white guy to replace him.
Right.
You know, it's like, huh? You know, and this is what's happening in Venezuela. But you're right. You got two things. You got the media is complete. I've never seen, and this was in 2002.
You've
I've
never
written about
seen?
it. I've never seen bias of this. No, I think this is a magnitude.
This is worse than WMD's.
This is the worst. And now
So
I
now
did
why-
it,
no,
just
let
so
me-
you know, I did an investigation for when I was with BBC and The Guardian. They put me on the Iraq investigation. We got the secret plans for the oil fields of Iraq, which was never reported in the United States of
Oh,
America.
really?
I did it on the top of the nightly news. But
So why
but
did
in terms of bias, I have to say, at least there were some media and some Democrats
So you're saying like this
who
time
were saying
around,
no.
Phil Donahue got fired from MSNBC? It was ubiquitous across the board that people were pro-Iraq
Yeah.
invasion. The New York
yeah,
Times,
yeah.
the Washington Post told everybody they were crazy if they didn't think there was WMDs. Literally said you're crazy if
Right.
you don't think that there's WMDs.
No,
and-
it's hard to say what's worse. So just put it this way: that was bad. That's why I'd say this is even worse, if you can imagine, because it's.
'Cause
My God, it's one thing
Even
to
AOC
argue
won't
about,
stand up against it.
about whether they're weapons of mass destruction. I know it was phony. It was bullshit. Remember BBC? We reported it, that they had sexed up the reports, and Tony Blair tried to control
Really?
BBC.
BBC reported that?
BBC reported the right stuff in London. Not, by
When?
the way,
When?
just so you know, in 2003.
Oh,
before the
really?
invasion. Yep.
You're freaking kidding me.
No.
So why was the BBC doing that then and now they are so horrible?
You've had some real unfortunate changes, but also I got to tell you
Same
something
thing
else
with the
about
Guardian.
BBC.
The same thing with the Guardian.
I
Like
got-
they used to do such good work and now they're so
They've
horrible.
pulled back from reality a bit, and part of that too is you have to. I have to say this about the people I work with.
I
I
know.
love them, but but what's happened is also you have to understand that there's a difference between what BBC says to you in London and what BBC says to you out of BBC USA.
Oh, really?
And I've even had to take my own reports and edit them. In other words, pull them back a bit for the U.S. broadcasts.
Because the BBC has been ubiquitously lying about war. So they've been lying about Syria. They've been lying about Libya. They've been lying about Venezuela.
I'm
So-
very disappointed with Venezuela because because it's something you can see with your own eyes. As you can see 100,000 opposition white people marching down the street. They cover that. But then there's 400,000
Right.
brown people
that they don't cover.
cover. How can it's like it's in front of you. It's not like it's like this is like you don't need Greg Palast in his
Right.
investigative reporter hat to
Right.
figure this out. It's like you just
You
look
don't-
down the street.
This is what-
this
Okay,
is
I got to
what-
jump in here really quickly because Greg, I want to ask you because people have been wondering why do you keep saying brown people? Like people are like affected by the use of brown people, but I get what you're saying.
Well,
do you think our country or countries that are being invaded are they typically
Brown countries.
fair skinned?
They're not. we
Okay,
don't,
well,
we're not
if you want,
invading.
I just want to tell you that please do not impose American PC terms on the terms that are used by the Venezuelans themselves. Okay, Chavez called himself Negro e Indio, black and Indian. I know that that's not considered. If he said that in the U.S., we would say, "Oh, he's not very PC," but he is black and Indian. He was. So is Maduro. Okay, so let's be a little bit careful about imposing how we describe. How people of color here describe themselves, let people there describe themselves as they prefer to be described. Okay, but I do understand it. So please, I understand that some people this may sound when I'm using terms that Venezuelans use that I am using terms that are uncomfortable a bit in the U.S. So let me translate from the Venezuela into American. Yes, it would be people of color are the majority in Venezuela, and now they got some Blanco to say here's your president, because we know he's the president and that he's not a dictator, even though he's never run for office. But here you also, like I say, you don't need to be a great investigative reporter or a lousy one to look down the street and see what's going on. You don't have to be a great. You know that the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, I just read an article yesterday about there's no food or medicine in Venezuela. Here's one of the big things, though. They say, and some people, this is a quote from the New York Times. I love this when they do this. Some people say.
Some people say.
Who are some people? Some people say it's the result of corruption and incompetence of the Maduro government. Who are these some people? And what is their color, by the way? And who are they working for? Some people say, and there was zero mention of an embargo. There was zero mention of the fact that, and we talked about Goldman Sachs, that the U.S. government, that is the Secretary of Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, ordered the seizure of Venezuela's assets, and they're taking the money that was supposed to be paid to Venezuela for its oil, and they're dripping it back slowly to its creditor, Goldman Sachs. Mnuchin comes out of Goldman Sachs, so instead of feeding the people of Venezuela, it's feeding the Goldman Sachs and their bonuses. And that's what's happening to the oil money of Venezuela. That's the con. That's the game.
So it's not Maduro keeping the oil money from his people. It's actually Goldman Sachs, Trump, Elliott Abrams.
They make it sound like Maduro is keeping it all in the basement of the presidential palace, or that he's got big houses in Miami and stuff. He doesn't. When he came to New York, let me tell you, he had no money when he came to see me. He came in his little, they didn't have nothing. They were staying at this cheap-ass hotel. They had a tough time. And I just got to tell you, it's in front of your face. Why aren't they talking about the embargo? Why aren't they talking about why is the British government
Why do you think, Greg?
Oh, I forgot.
Okay. I'll tell you why.
Oil and money.
So I'll tell you exactly why. Because the people who report the news in the United States are owned and funded by the people they're supposed to be investigating. That's the problem. I don't care how high of an IQ Chris Hayes has at MSNBC. He's a bought and paid for corporatist mouthpiece, just like Noam Chomsky tells you in Manufacturing Consent. Chris Hayes is there to manufacture consent. And the minute Chris Hayes doesn't manufacture consent, they will fire his fucking ass like they fired Phil Donahue. And the reason why I keep pointing to Chris Hayes is because people think he has integrity and he's a smart because he's a nerd. It just goes to show you nerds also have no integrity when offered $30,000 a day. And I'm sorry to say that about Chris Hayes. He does good work sometimes when he's allowed to, but he is a mouthpiece paid for by the military-industrial complex and the oil companies, and so he will manufacture consent, just like Rachel Maddow, just like everyone knows Chris Matthews is a piece of it. Everyone knows that. That's not a secret. And anybody else, and now they gave Casey Hunt, who doesn't even know why we're sending troops to Syria. She didn't no idea. She was angry at Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard had to school her. They gave Casey Hunt her own show on MSNBC. So again, what Greg, all the stuff he is saying, you've seen Greg all over the news, right? You've seen him on CNN and MSNBC talking about this. No, have they invited you on to talk about this, Greg?
The only time I've ever gotten invited on to talk about Venezuela was on Fox News.
So they could beat me up. Something.
Yeah,
so they can make you look like an idiot,
right? Or they could try.
Right.
Yeah,
try.
Exactly. So you're a Chavez stooge or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like,
did you go?
Yeah, of course I went on Fox.
How'd it go?
Fantastic.
Nice.
I'm happy to have a platform, even if it's Fox News.
Well, you know what's
shitting
funny
on me, because
is
at least I can say something. The problem is the silence, and one of the
yes,
the problem is the silence. And again, you get, and this is okay. Venezuela is just the final and like low point in media manipulation, but it didn't just, obviously, as you point, it didn't start with Venezuela. I'm well known in the U.S. For those who know me, watch your show, because back in 2000, I uncovered that George Bush and Jeb Bush and Catherine Harris in Florida removed tens of thousands of black people from the voter rolls.
And that was in Michael Moore's movie about it.
That's right. And what happened was, in 2004, 4 years later, the New York Times editorialized about the infamous felon purge, because what happened, they accused black people of being felons. Not one was. Felons who at that time couldn't vote in Florida. And they blocked them from voting. That elected George Bush as president. Never covered in the U.S. In 2004, the New York Times called it, reminded us of the infamous felon purge of 2000. How can it be infamous, New York Times, when you refused to report it? I finally got the omerta at the New York Times broken by an African-American columnist who put it in his column, so it could be a news report, so it's kind of opinion that black people were removed from the voter rolls. And but it required a black columnist to at least whisper it out the door. But they would not cover the news of the black people being removed from the voter rolls. And if you think that was the bad old days, I was just, like I said,
No,
I was
of course.
just in Georgia.
They're doing it,
saying
of course.
where I had the information that a third of a million people were illegally removed from the voter rolls. Stacey Abrams is screaming about it. There's not a one word about it. They keep saying, she talks about vote suppression. But they never tell you that's exactly what happened. That's how Brian Kemp got elected. They will never ever say this is the
Isn't
son
that
of a
it?
bitch who got
Why?
voted in by Jim Crow tactics.
Why won't they do that? Why won't they call that out? It's weird. It is weird.
It
It's
is
also
weird.
weird to see the Democrats not screaming about the repeal of the Voting Rights Act. I mean, they don't scream about any of this stuff. They don't scream about voting integrity. Debbie Wasserman Schultz has stolen her last 2 elections from Tim Canova. It's blatant. It's obvious to see. And no one's talking. No one, not even Bernie. Bernie, they cheated him unbelievably in the primary. Won't talk about it. Why won't anybody talk about election fraud?
because
But
if
the
you-
Republicans will talk about voter fraud, which
Yeah,
is non-existent.
existent, right.
But election fraud is all over the place.
I know. Well, Brian Kemp, when he was running his election, when he was running his own election to run for governor, kept talking. He was removing people on the grounds to prevent voter fraud, and yet they didn't arrest one single person. It's a felony crime. He said millions. He removed hundreds of thousands of people to prevent this fraud, and not one of them was charged with a crime.
Right.
Because their only crime was voting while black,
That's
and
right.
voting while Asian, and voting while Hispanic, and that's what it was. And you're right, it's not covered. And you know, I actually had a meeting, by the way, with Bernie Sanders and Reverend Jesse Jackson.
You had a meeting with Bernie Sanders?
And Jesse Jackson, and
And you had a meeting. What? Go ahead.
the Reverend said to
And the Jesse
Senator
Jackson said, "We got to stop babies making babies." I am somebody from the outhouse to the state house, from the state house to the White House.
I can't do Jackson.
Okay.
But it's but he's basically saying, if you want, Senator, if you really want to talk to black people, you got to talk about the issue. And the issue is that we're not allowed to vote.
Really?
And he specifically wanted him to listen. He said, you listen to what Greg Palast is saying.
Really?
And take these things. And
What
I
year
will
was
say,
this? What year
and
was
I will
Bernie
say,
say?
Bernie said, I will, and I hope he will bring up this issue. Whether he,
Hasn't brought it
don't
up
forget
yet.
that the media is so bad that if he does bring up the issue, I'm not sure it would be reported.
Right, you're probably-
So you got to remember that.
Right.
He may
They
be
try to
bringing up-
use it against them. They'd look
Yeah.
for a soundbite to spin
Yeah,
it the other way.
you're
That's
right.
what they would do.
When did
Yeah.
when did you have this meeting?
I had it last year with him. So he
20
said, if you're gonna,
2018.
Yeah, so if you're going to run, you got to do this. You have to take up these issues.
And how did that meeting come about? Jesse Jackson set it up?
Yeah, Jesse Jackson set it up,
Okay.
and he wanted Liz Warren to join us, but she ducked out. Interestingly, and
I don't think she's a phony at all.
Yeah, well,
I don't think so.
we don't know.
I don't think she's a grandstanding phony.
Okay, I'm not laughing. I'm a reporter. I can't laugh at your jokes. I'm not allowed to laugh at your jokes. I have to just the facts, ma'am. And
You
but-
remind me of one of those dirty bankers that I wag my finger at and never recommend prosecution for.
yeah, so but all I'm saying is that yeah, it's hard to you can't get this issue out because it's like an attack on American. You're saying America doesn't have a democracy. No, we have a mockery of democracy.
Yes.
We have kind of an imitation of democracy.
Yeah.
It's not a bad imitation, but it's not
Right.
the real thing.
We
it's
have
not
a
the real thing.
Yes, we have we have an
But,
oligarchy.
yeah,
is what we actually
I was very
have.
concerned
Greg.
about, when Bernie won California. Okay, I ran that's the other thing is I get attacked. I do get in the U.S. media. They don't completely ignore me. They once in a while mount attacks on me.
Yeah.
Like when.
Well, you're going to get more views on this show than you are going to get on MSNBC.
Oh,
Unless you're on
MSDNC?
Rachel
Oh,
Maddow's
no,
show.
okay.
But if you go on one of those shows like their morning shows or their afternoon shows, that no one's watching those
Joy
shows.
Reid sneaks
No.
me in on weekends when she says.
Oh,
the
see, that's what I mean.
And you know
And
what she
that's why
says?
I
She
never
says, 'Cause
noticed.
the executives aren't watching.
No shit.
I shouldn't say that, should I?
That's
anyway,
I'm
really-
glad you did.
But the thing is, and she's one smart lady, and she's trying to survive it there. But the thing is,
I'll let that go. I'll let that slide on this show because you're doing such a good job otherwise.
but okay. So Bernie wins. So they're doing in Venezuela. What happened? And that's the problem is that Democrats have their hands dirty with vote suppression. I hate that word. That's why I can't get on National Petroleum Radio because I won't use the term vote suppression like Ari Berman would. Everything's like soft.
Yeah.
And he says vote suppression.
Yeah.
And I said, when your car's stolen, do you say your car's been suppressed? It's like, what are you talking about? What's this vote suppression stuff? And then, they won't use the term race. Like I was investigating, Jesse Jackson wanted Bernie Sanders to go against this massive purge program created by Chris Kobach of Kansas,
Right.
Mr. KKK, called Interstate Crosscheck. And he said, Bernie, you got to take this one on. Okay. And Bernie said, fine. But the problem is that, you couldn't get that in the papers. So you'd have like guys like Berman say, "Oh, this is a vote suppression tactic." Who are they suppressing? Oh, it's inaccurate, and the Russians could hack the system. It's like the Russians. Wait, it's not about the Russians, but they will not breathe. They will not. You know, a guy like Berman will not breathe the C word. It's voters of color who are targets, and you cannot say that because we now have. We have Martin Luther King's birthday off. We had a half black president. So shut the fuck up because we don't have Jim Crow anymore. So we talk about voting.
We actually do. It's called the drug war.
Yeah, well, we definitely have Jim Crow voting. Believe me, except it's not Jim Crow anymore. It's Dr. James Crow, computer analyst.
So all they have to do is arrest a black person for a drug crime, and then they can't vote for the rest of their life. They're just disenfranchised. So that's why we're trying to get that overturned too.
But the thing is I remember in California, I said I got all the numbers. They did something that the Washington Post did not want to do, which is I actually got the numbers from the Office of the Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, former Hispanic, and you missed that.
I got it.
And who was one of the campaign managers for Hillary Clinton while she's running against Bernie Sanders, and he's counting the votes or not counting. What they did was were almost 1 million, about 900,000 votes which were disqualified. Almost 1 million votes. I've never seen that much. I didn't see that in Alabama. There's probably not that many voters, but it's like literally almost 1 million votes were disqualified from almost overwhelmingly from what were called NPP, no party preference voters. These were people who were told wrongly that you could vote in the Democratic primary if you're independent. It's a whole complex process.
Right.
They were given provisional ballots. They were given the wrong types of ballots. They knew, and this was deliberate.
Of course.
This chaos was deliberate, and they got disqualified on technical means. We know that 3 out of 4 NPP voters, as they call them, these independent voters, had voted for Sanders. So Sanders' victory in California primary was in this dumpster of 900,000 votes. In fact, in L.A., it almost literally went into a dumpster. 66,000 ballots were going to be disqualified, and they were in bins about to be literally thrown to the dumpsters. And I will say that in Los Angeles County, that when the county clerk was challenged on it, they said, okay, we'll count those votes. Because it's really up to each county. You can count those. I mean, because the Supreme Court at one time in its life did say you can, the voters' intent count. Why am I off on these elections? Because if they do it in California, you think they give a fuck about what people really do and who people really want in Venezuela?
Right.
Okay. If they're stealing your vote in Hollywood, they're gonna fucking steal your vote in Venezuela. And they know that the dark-skinned Venezuelans, and I'm sorry if you don't like that term, but that's if the Negro e Indio of Venezuela don't want this white guy picked by Trump.
Right.
They don't give a fuck, and the media doesn't give a fuck because they've made the decision about who that president should be, and so you make the excuse, you just say Maduro's a dictator. It's odd. A dictator who allows opposition people to run around in the streets with guns, who allows them to have control of the media, who allows them to, in fact, conspire with foreign powers to invite in an invasion. But somehow he's a dictator.
But this is obvious to guys like you and me, Greg. But no one will say this on corporate TV. No one will say this on MSNBC or CNN or ABC or anywhere.
Because the line is there.
No one is allowed to say what. Again, it's just logic, right? So the logic is that if he's a dictator, why does he allow Juan Guaido to have huge rallies in the middle of his capital? Why would you not imprison that guy? Because that's what dictators do. It's because he's not a dictator. That's why.
And he doesn't have to be because most of the people are going to vote for him.
That's right.
That's just the demographics of Venezuela.
Right. The only people more unpopular than Maduro in Venezuela is his opposition.
Right. And there's no question. He's like, Maduro is not popular. He's like an unpopular president. This often happens. I mean, Obama in 2010 was incredibly unpopular in the United States.
You're right.
We didn't.
Nobody wanted to overthrow.
Yeah, why don't we invite the candidate to overthrow Obama? Because his popularity's dropped to 35%.
Right.
But yeah, like you say, Maduro is not popular, but he's more popular
than his opposition,
than the fascists, than the oil company stooges that are being imposed on the nation. And that's a story that's not being told. And again, then you have to look at phonies like, let me go north. Not Pierre Trudeau, his son.
Justin
Trudeau, who come, the American press loved him because he talks all about how, unlike Trump, he's worried about global warming.
Yeah.
Except he's the #1 salesman of
No
tar sand shit, which is burning up the planet. And the reason he wants the government overthrown, the reason why he's in love with the embargo against Venezuela, he's a big proponent of the embargo against Venezuela because
he has the tar sand.
He's got the heavy oil that is competing directly with the Venezuelan oil.
That's right.
And it's like hello.
It's not well, let me just make this point because I wanted to make it before. You said you don't have to be a great investigative reporter or a bad one. All you have to do is look down the street. That's exactly right. All you have to do is look at what's happening. We got Donald Trump wanting to invade a country that's got more oil reserves than Saudi Arabia. Do you really need more information than that? It's just, but apparently people like Rachel Maddow and people like Jake Tapper and people like Wolf Blitzer and every asswipe at the New York Times and Washington Post, they all need more information somehow. So this is what makes me angry is that if I know it, I know they know it, and they're just bullshit, horrible liars and propagandists. Read Manufacturing Consent. That's why those people. Do you ever see the movie Broadcast News? William Hurt. That's who they are. They're chosen. They're Johnny Bravo. They fit the suit, baby. It's not because they're journalists. They're going to tell you the truth or even inform you. They don't give a fuck if you're informed. Rachel Maddow's got the #1 show in news, and she's been misinforming people at a nuclear level for the last 2.5 years. It's not about informing you. It's about making money. And right now, you make more money for your overlords if you go along with a foreign invasion. And that just shows you that they have zero integrity. A guy who, in his garage, a Jagoff nightclub comedian, C student, can do journalism 10 times better than them. And why? Because I'm not bought. And I can tell you the truth, just like Greg says, all I have to do is look down the street. Hey, look, there's 500,000 people demonstrating in favor of Maduro. All I have to do is do that. All I have to do is look at Max Blumenthal's video from inside a supermarket inside Venezuela to know they're all full of shit. All I have to look is at Abby Martin's video to see 1 million people in the street for Maduro. That's all you have to do. They can do that just like me. Them pretending they don't know any better is bullshit. And it's funny how they want to throw conspiracy theory around to silence people who are telling the truth that the corporate media won't tell. And 99% of the lefty media, too, fucking worthless on this topic, as they are worthless on Russiagate. They're just as shitty as the corporate news. It's like they all want to be corporate news. But guess who doesn't want to be corporate news? Me, because I made my bones in comedy. All the people I want to impress in my fucking life, I already did. They're in comedy, okay? These people in journalism I have no respect for. Fucking zero. I don't want to impress David Korn or Rachel Maddow or some asshole at the fucking Washington Post. I'm going to expose them for being the piece of shit propagandists they fucking are. And 99% of the lefty media, too. The assholes at Mother Jones, fucking Slate, Politico, they all fucking suck. And half the YouTube, 90% of the fucking YouTubers, too, suck when it comes to Israel, Syria, Venezuela, Russiagate. It's fucking easy for a dumb motherfucker like me who smokes pot when he wakes up to do a 10-time better job than they're doing. It's fucking easy, and I want to say thank you for sucking so hard. My show's about to cross 500,000 subscribers.
All right, we got that again with a little emotion.
All right, so we're gonna take a break. I want to say thank you to Greg for coming in and sharing all. This has been amazing, and I can't believe more people don't. I can totally believe more people don't have him on to talk about this because it undercuts their narrative.
Well, thank you. You can I could sneak stuff out through Jimmy Dore and at gregpalast.com, and there's been some again overseas. I used to be lucky to be able to grab the front pages, but here in the U.S. it's been omerta. This is a tragedy because if this keeps going, we're going to have dead American kids on those beaches.
No kidding. Ron, you had a question?
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask one question because we kind of circled back around to the tar sands. So I was just wondering, do you think, because this is my first hearing about the direct connection to Keystone, do you think this was kind of in the cards the whole time because of the Keystone Pipeline?
No question that the neocon operation wanted to get Hugo Chavez. They absolutely wanted to get Hugo Chavez. And now when Chavez, I have a film called The Assassination of Hugo Chavez, but in fact he survived all their attempts, and he died naturally. Forget all the conspiracy theories. He died naturally and suggested that people vote for Maduro to replace him. they had to get rid of this Chavista government because they were basically using the oil and oil money to help the people. And one thing that's really, really important to understand, and here's a very interesting side to this story on control of the money. Hugo Chavez took the gold of Venezuela out of the Federal Reserve. They said he was crazy, and now that Britain has seized Venezuela's gold in Britain, it's not so crazy at all. It was quite brilliant. He took out the gold. He took the money out of the Federal Reserve because what was happening is that all of Venezuela's money for oil, I mean all of it, 100%, every dollar that Venezuela got from the U.S. for its oil, from the Koch brothers, went right back into the U.S. banks. So the U.S. was just circled right back to the U.S. banks. Remember that line from the film The Network? The money goes out, now it must come back in. And so that's what happened. And Chavez stopped that. This is the other thing, Jimmy. It's not just the oil. It's that Chavez took the oil money and said, you know what? We're not sending it back north. I'm going to send up a fund, a competitor to the World Bank and the IMF, to lend money throughout Latin America, which he did. He saved Argentina from bankruptcy. He saved Ecuador from bankruptcy. He saved Brazil from bankruptcy using the oil money. Instead of putting it in banks and giving it to Goldman Sachs and giving it to Citibank, he literally took it and lent it. And Venezuela did very well with these loans, by the way. He lent it into Latin America and saved these progressive governments. And that they cannot stand. So it was not just that Venezuela controlled the oil. They want to control their oil money.
Yeah.
And that the financiers cannot handle. That is a capital offense if there ever was one.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Go ahead. Anything else?
No, thank you.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing that I know who Greg Palast is, and I can bring him on my show, and I can have him tell the truth about Venezuela. Meanwhile, no other place can do this. No other place can bring.
That's really important. I mean,
I had Aaron Matei on my show. He's just back from Venezuela. Nobody else in Los Angeles invited him to be on the show. No, but here, just put your mic down a little bit. It's a little covering your face.
Thank
There
you,
you
buddy.
go. So I had Aaron Matei on my show. I had him on my show at the Aggressive Progressives in the Young Turks newsroom. I had him on this show. He's just right back from Venezuela. He's a reporter for The Nation. Did any other news organization in Los Angeles ask him to come on? No, not. Did you know of any? Cenk Uygur had him on to talk about Russiagate because he's an expert on that. So kudos to Cenk for bringing on a counter narrative on his show. But that was it. That was it, right? And here I got Greg Palast. He's got all this. No one has talked about the racial issue, which that's all the news talks about when it comes to Trump. And it's amazing that they're suppressing their reflex to do that, their instinct to do that. It's amazing how they're oppressing and suppressing their own instinct to talk about race with Trump when it comes to oil in Venezuela, which just goes to show you that they've been told not to. Chris Hayes, Rachel Maddow, they've been told not to. Jake Tapper doesn't need to be told.
You know, Jake, I got to give you. See, on this show, I give you the anecdotes inside. And
Yeah,
I know
please.
This I'm cutting my own throat, but that's career-wise. But it's time that I told the truth on these guys.
Sure.
Jake Tapper worked for me on the investigation of the vote theft in Florida in the 2000 race.
Really? Okay.
Because Salon brought me in from England to expand the story and go into Florida and get the real information on how George Bush stole that election by removing black people from the voter rolls. The entire time, Jake did nothing. He didn't do any work at all. He simply dragged his feet and kept saying, this story can't be true. So thank you, Jake, for all your hard work being the anchor around my foot trying to get the story out. But it's not that he knew it couldn't be true. He knew that this story was not going to advance his career.
That's it.
Okay, and I'm going to be straight up about it, And also, there's something else in this too. Jake and he had a editor, Kerry Lauder. I want to name people. I want to name names. I don't want them to hide anymore. Went to Yale. Went to fancy prep schools. All this stuff. These are upper class kids, right? And I had a black minister who was illegally removed from the voter rolls. He was told he couldn't vote, and it was against it. It violated federal law, okay? Because he had a conviction in New York before he found God. He was a crack dealer, whatever. You can't move to Florida and suddenly have a new sentence of losing your vote because you don't lose your vote in New York. Okay, it's sorry if it's a little complicated. I know that you can do it on that you can do it on Jimmy Dore. I can't do that in the New York Times if it's complicated.
Right.
But anyway, so
you had this minister who had the right to vote, and they took it away from him in Florida. And the ACLU was ready to sue. They got my information. They brought a suit, and not Tapper, Louder, the white editor said to me, and I'm sorry if people bring up the point that it's a white editor, but that's very important.
Right,
White
it is.
prep school, Yale educated, Yale J school editor said, why didn't he raise hell when they told him he couldn't vote? I said, this is Alachua County, Florida, where within his memory, they were hanging black people for trying to vote. And you're telling him to pound the table. What happens to black men who pound the table in government offices?
Yeah.
Oh, we thought he was armed, they say at his funeral.
I feared for my life.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But this is what I was dealing with when I'm dealing with editors. Like, well, why wouldn't the black people say this? Who was that guy? He used to be a comic, Al Franken.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was on his show on Air America, and he said to me when I was talking about black people being illegally removed from the voter rolls, he said, well, if that's true, how come I didn't read it in the New York Times or the Washington Post?
He said that.
Wow.
And that's what's wrong with Al Franken.
That's what Al Franken said to me. I said,
and that's what's wrong with Al Franken.
I said, because
that's why I wasn't sad to see
I
him
don't
go.
know. You tell me. But that's why I appreciate being here. And I no longer, I made a vow to myself, I'm no longer going to shut my mouth. I'm no longer going to hide and protect these people who've been jacking you on the news and lying in your face, who are racist and they don't even realize they're racist. I mean, like the editor at Salon, the prep school white guy, and Jake Tapper, all these guys, they don't think that they're racist. They think that they're very progressive, because they go to parties with Michelle Obama and stuff. And they think, well, I'm progressive,
Yeah, Michelle Obama's not progressive.
And so what happens is, but they think I'm not racist.
She's an oligarch.
I'm not racist, but they will report they'll report stories. They will doubt questions when black people say I wasn't allowed to vote, etc. They don't appear. I will film people. You know what? The only one, I was in Georgia. Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin was turned away from the polls, and I had her on camera, and I had her daughter, her niece on camera, in tears, like this woman, this is Martin Luther King's cousin, and they wouldn't let her vote. And a bit of that went viral around the net. It didn't go on any news station. That wouldn't happen,
right?
But what I was pointing out was, while this was like particularly poignant, she was one of 340,134 people wrongly removed. And where have you seen that news?
No,
it's
you don't
not
see it.
there. And I'm losing, it's like, this is hard news, Jimmy. And I'm trying to see what do I have to do? Skywriting?
I know.
Show my putts on the 101? I don't know what's left. And Venezuela, I got to tell you, Venezuela actually cracked it for me. I just said, this is, no longer will I try to play along to see if I can break into the U.S. media and be, and get a nice job in the U.S. media. Work my way in. Like I say, New York Times called me, and other, some of the mainstream people are now saying, well, maybe, even though the Washington Post did cover me once when they said respected investigative reporter Greg Palast, and I quote that, respected investigative reporter Greg Palast has lent his name to conspiracy theories that Bernie Sanders won the California primary. And I called up the little shit who wrote that story.
They're all pretty shitty over there.
And I said, and he was nervous because he'd read my books in J school. I think
was it Dave Weigel?
And
Yeah,
and
Dave Weigel is a fucking shit.
Okay, I
it's
would
easy.
say.
Ron confronted him at a rally for Bernie Sanders. He almost shit his pants.
And
the
so,
guy's the
so he
biggest
was very
fucking
nervous.
coward.
He said, "Oh, I'm sorry."
He's very nervous. He's a coward.
He's a coward. So he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And I said, when does arithmetic become a conspiracy theory? Here's the numbers.
Yeah, he did that to us. He tried to smear us as conspiracy
theory.
Yeah,
that's
his tool.
You know
what a piece of shit
I'm
that
always
guy
called.
is.
I get. I'm called a conspiracy theorist. I'm
What
a
a
conspiracy
piece of
theorist,
shit
which gets a
Dave
big
Weigel is.
laugh from the conspirators. And that's how it really works. And so
arithmetic's not. I said, also, by the way, you violated a basic rule of journalism. Here's my cell phone. Here's my direct emails. My
he
personal
never
stuff.
called us
and
either.
I said, if you want to write a story
He
about
never
me,
called me.
you know,
He never called
call
me.
me up and talk
He's
to
got
me.
my fucking number.
He
He
wrote
never called
another
me.
story attacking me after apologizing for the first one.
Of course,
And
because
without calling me up.
Dave Weigel is ordered to write those stories.
Exactly.
You understand
He's
that,
not-
right?
yeah,
He's
it's
not
not
an independent
him.
thinker. That's why he writes those. Why do you think he's gainfully employed by the Washington Post to cover
Right.
people
I-
like us?
that's why I
Because
don't
he's a
go-
fucking mouthpiece, Greg.
Because that's why I don't go after the little glove puppets. I go after the fists in the glove.
Yeah.
And that's what my work is about, is uncovering those assholes.
You would
and
say
those vicious
Dave Weigel is a
billionaires.
glove puppet.
Yeah, you
right.
know, I mean, but
We don't spend much time on him
What
here,
I'm
Dave,
concerned with
either.
is whose fingers are in him.
Right.
That's-
Who's controlling him?
Yeah.
Because he's being controlled. And it's obvious to see that he writes bullshit like that. It's such bullshit. He did the same thing to us, didn't call us. He knows that you're supposed to do that. He didn't. He wrote a bull fucking smear piece. CNN did the same thing to us. That they're afraid of fucking independent media that actually tells the truth about shit they won't tell the truth about. Like the fucking voter scam with Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. I mean, and suddenly I'm taking numbers from the Secretary of State's office and I'm showing you the arithmetic, and I'm putting up on a screen the numbers. I had to do it at a rally. I can't even get it into a paper, right? So then all I get is this. And by the way, Weigel wasn't there. He pretended. He covered my statement without actually being there.
Of course.
He fucking made it up.
Of course he did. He makes up lots of shit.
But
It's Dave
again,
Weigel.
I don't care about him. He's just a factotum. I don't care. He's not a reporter.
Half his fucking
He's-
followers on Twitter. Hey,
he's
hold
a-
on.
he's a-
Hold on. Half his fucking followers on Twitter are fucking fake. All right? The guy's a fake. And people still think he's a nice guy. He was pro-Iraq war. That's who fucking Dave Weigel is. And of course, that's why he works for the Washington Post. And he lies. I caught him lying on Twitter about Jeff Bezos having a business arrangement for $600 million with Amazon and CIA. He lied about it. He gaslit people on Twitter. A reporter for the Washington Post. I fucking caught him. That's how shitty the Washington Post is, because they hire guys like Dave fucking Weigel, who you smelled him out to be a bullshitter. I smelled him out to be a bullshitter. He's a fucking bullshitter, so he'll have a job forever at the
Yeah, but
Washington Post.
These are nothings, because what they are, they're not reporters, they're repeaters.
He's a repeater.
And that's the problem. Is that it's
And a
this
smearer,
echo
by the way. If the
Oh, yeah.
establishment doesn't want you, he'll smear them for you, and he's ordered to do so.
Yeah, I mean, like, why exactly was? I mean, the Washington Post doesn't, ignores me, and suddenly I'm being attacked for what I've said. Like, well, wait,
Right.
why don't you? I'm suddenly important to you,
Right, and
what
all the-
Greg Palast says is suddenly it's important.
Suddenly, yeah.
When they need someone to hold up the smear,
Yes.
because they're worried that my arithmetic would get out there, and they say, hey, wait.
Hey, Greg
Sanders-
Palast is telling the truth about what happened in California. We got to get.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave Weigel, could you write a smear piece on him? Call him a conspiracy theorist. That's the one we always go to. It works.
Yeah,
That's exactly what Dave Weigel does.
I lent my name
Yeah.
to the
You
conspiracy.
lent your name to a conspiracy theory. Dave Weigel lent his name to lying publicly on Twitter about Jeff Bezos and the CIA, and fucking Jagoff me caught him. That's what you lent your
Bless
name to, and he has no integrity. The only reason why he still has a job and people is because they're all full of shit. Journalism sucks in America. For 2 years, they've been pushing a fucking Russiagate conspiracy theory at the top of their lungs while calling people who are telling the truth about the election Greg Palast a conspiracy theorist. That's what the Washington Times does. That's what the New York Times does. That's what CNN and MSNBC does, and that's why I have a fucking job.
They had in Michigan, they had supposedly Trump won by 10,700 votes. 75,000 ballots were not read in Detroit. Okay, in fact, 75,355 votes. I know the arithmetic. And they said, well, we don't know, because the machines couldn't read those ballots because the machines broke down. 87 machines broke down. So what happened, Jimmy, is that 87 machines broke down in Detroit. By the way, Detroit, Wayne County, told the Republican governor, we need money for new machines. The machines aren't going to work. The machines are going to break down. Oh, what a terrible thing that the machines will break down in Detroit. They don't reach 75,000 votes. Whose votes were they? Were they Donald Trump's in Detroit? That is the problem. So like I say, you have this, and so it's Jim Crow in Michigan, not just in Caracas. This is the big problem, and that was not covered anywhere. Instead, it's the Russians. And I got to tell you,
It's
I
Russia.
was in Michigan, and I don't think met all these auto workers in Michigan and Ohio. they voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary. They voted for Donald Trump in the general election, and I don't think it's because they saw a Facebook ad from Russia. What they said is, we're getting screwed out of our jobs. And I agree that Donald Trump lied to them and bullshitted them, but it was not wasn't the Russians that told Hillary Clinton, don't campaign in Wisconsin. And when you're in Michigan and when you're in Detroit, make sure that you promote NAFTA. Great. Okay, the Russians must have told her to do that, because that's the only way that's the only way that I could conceive that Russia fixed the election.
Right.
And it wasn't Russia that didn't count those 75,000 black ballots. It was the Republican-controlled governor who made sure that those ballots wouldn't be counted. And by the way, when Hillary Clinton had sent her lawyers into the courtroom in Lansing, Michigan, and if you remember, it was Jill Stein who had paid for. She said, okay, it wasn't a recount. People have that wrong. She wasn't talking about a recount. What she was saying is, take those 75,000 uncounted ballots the machines couldn't read and use a better machine called the human eyeball to read them, and then Hillary will have won the presidency, or would have won Michigan's electoral votes. Trump sent in lawyers who said, Jill Stein has no right to have these votes.
She didn't have standing. She didn't have standing.
So the judge asked Hillary Clinton's lawyers, who were sitting in the courtroom, and say, well, what do you want to do? Because Hillary Clinton has standing. What does Secretary Clinton want? And they said, we are only here to observe. And
so
they
why
let
do you
those
think
black
that
votes
is?
get uncounted.
And so why do you think that is, Greg? Why wouldn't it's obviously in Hillary Clinton's interest to want to have those votes counted? Why wouldn't she want them counted?
Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton have publicly stated that their current net worth is $250 million.
Billion.
Question answered.
Okay, I got you. All right, we got to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to take your questions that have been, I'm sure, building up.
Well, I just want to let you know, Jimmy, that we had over 8,000 people watching today.
Oh, 8,000 live streamers. Isn't that nice?
That's great.
That's a new record. So fantastic. Thank you so much, Greg, for being here.
And you're very
everybody can check out Greg at gregpalast.com.
Yes.
And what's the free download they have? They can also get a free
They can get a free download of my investigative reports on Venezuela from BBC. We made a film out of it called The Assassination of Hugo Chavez. It's a free download at gregpalast.com.
Okay, Greg, great work. Really good to see you. And thanks for coming in and spreading the truth and naming names. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Jimmy. I better put on a disguise now.
You're all right.
Okay.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back in just a few minutes.